and gorged on Swiss chocolates and Milko's creamy body. We called the Milko period our White Velvet Revolution, inspired by Czechoslovakia's nonviolent anti-communist revolution called the Velvet Revolution, because Milko's body was so white and quite velvety to the touch, and it was sort of radical to share the same man with such ease and comfort. Since Marija's parents were mercifully back in Sarajevo at the time of our college revolutions, they didn't have the fortune of seeing us in our bald countercultural glory. My parents, on the other hand, expressed profound signs of embarrassment, shame, and revolt, all in alternating order, whenever Marija and I visited them in the same three-room apartment that smelled like a vicious mixture of burnt cabbage and heavy Russian perfume. If a neighbor happened to be close by when my parents, Marija and I, entered the building or came out on the balcony, my father started talking about the weather, the most recent news, the fall of the Berlin Wall, or the World Cup, to draw their attention away from us. My mother became meek and embarrassed and acted in a sickeningly apologetic way, as if we had just been released from the local asylum and were still in some kind of recovery, or as if she had no idea how those two strange-looking women ever landed in her apartment. Seeing the painful ways in which my parents dealt with my rebellious period, I stopped going home for a while and spent most of my days and nights with Marija, Milko, and the other handful of students of politics or philosophy who tried to be either Goths or simply off the mainstream of the patriotic Serbian youth populating our university. Marija wrote a brand of pornographic philosophical poetry that she pasted on the walls of the university hallways as another sign of protest. I thought her poetry was stunning, like the French surrealist poems, raw and disturbing, mixing body parts with political concepts and foods. She called it postmodern. Whenever we found ourselves in the most brooding and darkest of moods, out of sync with our surroundings, or whenever we became bored with our collection of Hollywood movies, poems, postmodern theory, and politics, Marija would pull out of her bag her leather-bound edition of Dante's Inferno. We would jump into one of the infernal circles at random, read it out loud, and then discuss at length the atrociousness of the punishment, which was our favorite, and which we would have preferred in case we did happen to fall into a situation like one of those that Dante's souls found themselves. Would we choose the howling winds that pushed the lustful mercilessly from place to place, like Francesca da Rimini forever tied to her adulterous lover Paolo Malatesta? Or the deep, muddy swamps of the sullen and keep gurgling in thick, dark waters for eternity? Would we have preferred running on burning sands like the blasphemers and the sodomites, or having our heads stuck inside burning tombs like the heretics? Would we have chosen Ulysses' cloak of fire, or the frozen place of the traitors of kin whose tears froze in their eyes before even having the chance to be fully formed? Marija always chose the waters and the ice. I chose the fires and the burning sands. She said it was because of our natures. We each chose the opposite of what we were. That meant that I was ice, and Marija was fire, and therefore we each chose the opposite element. The punishment of the fortune-tellers and the diviners, whose heads had been turned around so that they looked down at their asses, always made us laugh for hours. Still, our favorite was the punishment of the suicides, who had all been turned into trees that bled if you broke off a twig. I would commit suicide just to get that punishment after death, to become a bleeding tree, Marija would say. And then I would see her face scrunch in mad laughter, and she would say, "A good thing it is we don't believe in the afterlife." And then she would add with wicked irony, "Maybe the circle for sinners like us hasn't yet been invented. Lust, treason of country, blasphemy. Our circle would have to contain fire and ice in simultaneity with one another," she would conclude proudly. Marija also had very definite ideas about the political confusion in our country, which in her view was not a random confusion but a very deliberate one to distract people from what was really going on. She said that the new communism of Milosevic was a fascist communism, which indeed was an oxymoron, yet it wasn't like the old idealist communism of Josip Broz Tito, or the one of the chairman of the presidency in the post-Tito period, or even like the old-fashioned Soviet communism. The